think it's called UI visualizer if I'm not wrong. Where did it go? Imeenda wapi? Just let me see UI. And I saved the wrong thing. So I'll also share this in the chat. You can play around with it. Share that link. So the way it works is, so you write your JS hapa ndani. So let's say var class name and then CL inasahau na this code console.log now what it's going to do, there's the global execution context where the first thing that always runs, kitu ya kwanza kabisa, where all your global zinakuanga run, alafu kuna function execution context. So if you have a function, those things are run in that execution context. So I will try to show na visualizer. So I think let's go this tuseme now that step. So the first thing, so unaona we have the GEC, the global execution context. This is the creation phase. We go again. Now it's executing sasa. It created the execution context. Now it's executing whatever is in the global execution context. Then we step again, bado in execute. So imekuja hapa ikuwa na var last name initialized to Mike. But you see, unaona at this point, do you see last name is undefined? So unaona, because it was hoisted before initializing the value. So iko undefined at this point, bado haijaipatia value. It has been hoisted, yes, to the top of the execution context, but haina value. It does not assign the value. Then it steps through. Sasa imeweka sasa Mike. Now at this point, now we have Mike. But unaona, if I restart it again and I do the same thing, tukianza tena, if we start again, now let's step through it the once kwanza. So step. You can see I already have last name during the creation phase, not the execution phase. So it has been hoisted, ishai hoist, but haina kitu. So that explanation of they are hoisted, yes, but they're not initialized. Hakuna value. So the creation phase is to just create the execution context without anything. And then now as you move into the application sasa, now during the execution phase is when it sets those things sasa. Sasa imeshaiweka. Let's see whether it does the same thing for a function, because we know functions are also hoisted. So the behavior should be, when you click it, when you step into the application the first time, ukiona last name, usunaiona ndio hii hapa, it means it's already been hoisted. Because hakuna execution imefanyika, this is the creation phase. We haven't executed anything. So let's see whether also it will behave the same na function. We have a function. Let's restart it. Let's step. You can see. So unaona, again, we can see say hello is already here. Iko hapa already. So it's also being hoisted. So I think this is like, this will now allow us to have like a better view of Kenye inaendeleanga internally. But the global, there's the global execution context, alafu kuna function. Every time you run a function, there's another execution context that is created. So let's do that. So hapa kwa hii, let's now use this function. I will restart. And then I will simply take this code. I'll simply return, say hello. Then I will execute it hapa chini. I'll say hello. Then we will step through the code. So tuanze. So let's step in the first time. So this is the creation phase of the execution context. We've hoisted the last name and the say hello function. So the way it did it, anytime it sees the function keyword in a hoist, so it hoisted to juu. All right, so let's step in again through the process. Now we're in the execution phase of the global execution context. Okay, so now we are executing whatever we have. Should see last name, now Mike. Okay, now we are executing Mike. Sasa tushaipata hiyo value. Step through it again. Console logging. Let's step through it again. Again, it's console logging now. Now itafika mahali, it will create a new context hapa chini when we now get to executing the say hello. Step in again, step in again. So at this point now is when we want to execute it. There, so naona sasa, you see it created a new execution context. So naona. Then now if you had another variable hapa ndani, about semicolons. Here. Semicolon. Semicolon. So let's step through the code. Now, you can see sasa, so unaona code yetu vile iko, we still have the same thing during the creation phase. Let's step through it again. Now we are executing. Last name has been set now. Executing. We want to get to say hello. So that's when nashinda tu step through. So hii part hapa ina change. So it is actually doing something. Call expression statement. There. Now, remember vile nimewaambia, when you use var, it's hoisted not to the global scope, but to the functions. Kama we declare ndani ya function, it's going to be hoisted up mpaka mali the scope that it was declared in. That's why when we ran the code the first time, we did not see first name being undefined hapa. Sindio? Because it's not being hoisted in the global execution context. It is being hoisted in the function execution context for the function. That's why hapa kwa the creation phase of the say hello, we can see first name ndio hii hapa and it's undefined. Exact same behavior kama ya hapa juu. The first when it's in the creation phase. So unaona sasa sahi we have undefined because it's being hoisted. It's being hoisted to the current scope. Not huku nje, but the current scope mali it was declared. And then now you just step through and run the function. Then now you're executing the function. Then now you set Jake. You run the function, you finish, and you remove it out of the call stack. So that's why imepotea. And then that's it, imemaliza. So I think this should bring some clarity to like mambo ya hoisting. I believe this visual example is easier to follow. What do you guys think? Is it less confusing?
I think visualizing it like that really helps. It's, now you have an understanding of how
Hmm?
things. Visualizing it like that really helps.
Yeah,
Helps get that mental picture of how things are going. It's actually a very
yeah,
good website. Nimeshai bookmark.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's a good, inaonyeshana vizuri what is going on. So you can play around with it and then probably you'll get a better understanding. Okay. Okay, so now I think we can proceed with the presentations. Let me see. Let me see. So who was going next? So let's see. Is Fatma here? Oh yeah, she is. Fatma, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Uh, it's your turn.
Oh, I haven't even been in the call for 5 minutes. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So I'll stop presenting and then.
could you give me like 5 minutes? Because I just got to the
No
house right
problem.
now, so let me set up
Okay.
and I will present in 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay. No problem. So if you joined late, Eunice, and I don't know whether you guys caught what we were doing just now. Do I repeat? Because yesterday we were having issues with the let and const and var for like 30 minutes. We just were
Mm,
completely confused.
could you
I've also
please like
mhm.
just briefly take us through? Because I haven't like seen a single thing that you've done.
Okay, yeah, even Ian is saying repeat. Okay, so I've also sent, let me resend that link in the chat. So yesterday we were having issues with like let and const and var. Not let and const, just var. So the way I've always understood var, I know it's hoisted. So when you run your application, right? If you declare something with a var, it's hoisted up to the top of your application. So it's supposed to be accessible. So when you do something like console, do console.log first name, then you come here and now declare the first name here. Right? I've always thought, or this has always been my thinking, that you can now access first name. You can get mic. You'll get mic. So if I try this in the application, if I actually take this code and I open up the mentorship, let's see. Let's take this. We see what happens. And then I come here. I simply take that code. Actually, I already had it. I need to redo it, so I'll just comment out this section. And then I will take this console log and I'll put it here. Then I will launch the app. It should already open. you can see we are getting undefined from the response. So I'll split the screen into two. All right, so we are getting undefined. We are not, it's not an error, that's not an error. We are getting the undefined data type. So now the question was, like, what is going on? Why are we getting undefined? So it turns out there is hoisting happening. So when it comes across the var keyword, it will hoist the first name variable to the top of the execution context. But it will not initialize it. It will set it to undefined. That's why there's nothing. That's why when we try to log it before this section, right, we do have it in memory, but it has not been initialized. It does not initialize the value. That's why we are getting undefined. To visualize that, we were using this thing. So now we want to visualize that process. Okay. So I'll still leave the code that way, or what I can do, just to not confuse you guys, I'll just put it down here. The same behavior will happen, because what we want to see is the hoisting. So let's step through the application. The first step, let's step in. So when JS runs, there's something called the global execution context, which is what we see right here. And you can see the global execution context, or the execution context in general, has two phases, the creation phase and the execution phase. Now, during the creation phase, if you have anything that needs to be hoisted, it's done at that point. That is why we have not run anything. It's just created the execution context, the global execution context. But you can see already we have first name here and it's undefined. This is why we're having that behavior, because it is hoisted to the top of the execution context, but it's not initialized. Not initialized. That is why if you console log the value, where we did it, comes back as undefined. We'll start again. So let's restart the whole process. Let's step through. You can see this is the creation phase. At this point, it's undefined. It has not been initialized. It doesn't have a value. And sasa itabaki hivyo, because if we continue to step through, now we are executing. We continue to execute. Now we are executing this section here. Right here, hapa juu, we are executing this console log. Executing. So now it's trying to access first name, but there's nothing because it has not been initialized. Still undefined. First name is still undefined. Continue. Now is when we are actually giving it the value. After we have already run the console log during the execution phase. That's why it's undefined. Because the assignment of the value is happening after we have already run console.log. And remember, when it's being hoisted, it's undefined. So that's the value you log, because you have not yet assigned that value to your variable. So that's why we are getting undefined. Now let's restart the whole process. Same thing happens with functions. So functions are also hoisted when you have the function keyword. And the way to know it's hoisted, it's going to show up in the creation phase, not during the execution phase. If you look very closely, you will see the first step. You see this thing here, the phase, is the creation phase, and we already have the first name. So anytime you see this thing here, before we start executing Hapa, before the phase is now the execution phase, it means we've hoisted it. It's at the top of that execution context. Start, then we now use a function. And we want to, let's return. Okay, now remember what I said. If you see a value, if you see that variable name during the creation phase, it means it's being hoisted. So now, if I restart, step in, you can see say hello is here. we have that function here. So it's being hoisted. And then there's two things. We have the global execution context, and then we have the function execution context. So when you're executing your functions, it creates its own context. So the hoisting, so if you're putting your vars here in the global scope, it's going to be hoisted in the global scope. But if you put it within a function, hoisted within that context, not the global context. You will not see it during the creation phase as last name here is equal to undefined. So let's try that. Start. Then let's step through it. These are coming because of the semicolons. Semicolon here as well. So let's step through the code. Now, we can see our normal behavior. Say hello is hoisted. First name is hoisted, right? Then we continue to step through, step through, step through, continue to step through. Now, when we get to, okay, I have not actually called this function, sorry. I need to actually call it to create another execution context. So we'll restart and then we'll step through. We are now executing. Continue, 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 continue. Tuendelee. You can see we cannot see last name. Even though we are using var, we cannot see it here. It's not being hoisted to the global. That's why it's not visible here. It's not undefined. Let's continue. We'll get to a point where we'll see another. There. So now you see we have a new execution context that has say hello. So now we have a function execution context. And you can see during the creation phase, we now have last name. So it means it's being hoisted, but within this context of the function, not on the global. So it's being hoisted, yes, but up and down within say hello, not in the global context. That's why it's undefined. And then as we step through that function, as we execute it, right, as we assign the variables and return, you'll see at some point this undefined will become Jake. Continue executing now the function. There it is. We now have Jake. And as we continue executing, eventually it will be removed off the call stack. That's why it disappeared. And then you can see here, eventually we will see a finished. The program has finished now. Any questions? Ian, you joined a bit late. I think we have now hacked late var sasa. I think that makes sense sasa. Any question?
It's totally clear. The illustration is very helpful.
I've sent the link to the chat, so you can play around with it in your own time. Anyone with a question? Okay. All right. Fatma, are you ready? I think it took more than 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm ready now.
Okay. I'll stop presenting and then you can proceed.
Okay. So, yeah, I picked two topics, default parameters and template literals. So let's start with the default parameters. So in JavaScript, default parameters allow you to assign a value two function parameters. So in case you haven't specified what that value would be, it switches back to the default, like that would be used instead. This feature was introduced in ES6, so pretty new, I'm guessing. So I have an example here. So I have defined the default value here as cookie. So when you console log the name and call the function down here, let me just get rid of this one sec. I should probably comment these out as well. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. So if we pass in here another name, like we give the function another value when we're calling it, instead of passing in the default value, it's going to ignore this default value and pass in John instead. So the output would be hello, John. Sorry, I have a really bad cold. I can't talk for long. Yeah, so we could do one more example, I think. So let's name this function add and pass in some default values for two numbers. So number A would be 1 and B would be 2. So when we return A plus B, this would be 3, but we could also, let me just put some console logs here. Add, and then let's change the default values. Maybe let's just change for one of the numbers and see what happens with that. And then for the third one, we could change both the numbers. 2 and maybe 4. Yeah, so for the first one, it takes in the default values and returns the sum of A and B that's been defined in the function parameters. But for this, it picks one of the numbers. It replaces one of the numbers. It replaces A. So it would be 3 plus B, which is the default 2. And then for the last one, it doesn't consider either of the default values. It picks up the two new values that we passed in. So if no arguments are passed, the default values of A and B would be used. If only one argument is passed here, the default value of B would be used. And if both arguments are passed, these new values would be used. So I think that's pretty much all the default values are. So for template literals, template literals are a way to like, okay, so before I go on, yeah, okay, so template literals are a way to create string literals with embedded expressions. We use backticks and then the $sign and curly braces, right? Yeah. So I have an example here. So let's just console log it out. There's a user with a name value and an age value, and we're logging out a string. And here in the name value, we're using template literals to fill in the part of the string that's missing. This would output, hello, my name is Cookie and I'm 30 years old. I think we also, string literals are, template literals are also used for string concatenation, which this basically is, but they can also be used to create multi-line strings. So here's another example of that. Yeah, so this outputs every bit of this string on different lines. So another thing about template literals is that they also support any like valid JavaScript expressions. So let me just give like one last example of that. Let's declare some variables here. Yeah, so as long as whatever you put in between the curly braces is a valid JavaScript expression, whatever you have in your placeholder would be passed. So yeah, it's particularly useful when working with dynamic data, or when you need to put like line breaks in your strings, or just giving you more convenient ways to like what's the word, to like create strings. Yeah. I had a question that I didn't get the time to really like research on a lot, but what the difference between templates, literals, and default parameters are. So default parameters are used to like specify default values for function parameters. But when doing so, a string literal can be used as the default value of the function parameters, but template literals are used to create string literals that allow for the embedding of like these expressions. I think that's basically it.
Yeah, that was thanks, Fatma. That was a very nice presentation. Sorry for the cold. You, yeah, you still managed to do a good job. Does anyone have a question in terms of like default values or template literals or multi-line? Anybody with a query? What?
Yeah, Ian, I had a question. So, if you're trying to, if you, for example, you had A and B in that function, so you wanted to keep the default value of A and change the default value of B. So you passed in one parameter. when you call the function. So how do you do that?
Sorry, I don't think I understood the question. You want to?
Okay, by default, if you pass in one parameter, it will be taken as the default as the value of a in that function that we wrote.
Oh, the one Fatma had, Amma.
Yeah, the add function.
Maybe Fatma, you can share your screen, then we go through that example, go through the question.
One second.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so now when you the second console log, if maybe you wanted to add to give the default value to, because by default if you pass it 3 it will be taken as the value of for a, and then b will remain 2 and you get 5. What if you wanted to pass it as 3, then add it to a? Do you get it? Add it to a and then get 4.
What are we passing in as 3 exactly? So a is 3, right? And then so a is being assigned to, so 3 is being assigned to a, and then b, since we didn't pass in any value, is being assigned to. So your question is, if
you want to pass one value but to b, if you want to pass a value to b and you have 2 parameters, how do you do it?
That's a good question. I
Try
do know.
adding a comma. Try adding a comma for like a blank for the first time. A comma before the 3.
Just to like.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
Not
So
the expression expected.
I have a question for Ian. You want
Yes.
to keep the default value of A, but
Yeah.
change the default value of B.
Yeah.
I know you can use argument. You can use the arguments object to change the value, but I don't know how to go about that. I know how to go about it, but I'm not sure of how to like explain what I'm supposed to be doing.
yeah, I also now I get the question. So you're trying to, you want to change the value of b but keep the value of a to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure how to do that either.
What if we do it within the function itself? Instead of having a console log outside, we can replace the return here. And wait, let me just do what I'm thinking of. Yeah, I mean, that works, I guess.
I think, yeah, that works, but I think what he meant is like, how do you just change the value of b, I think, as an argument. So when you invoke add, how do you jump, I think, a and not assign it a value, but still, like, for example, when you are adding, we would put like 5 and something else, right? If you want to also have a value for b. So the
Yeah.
question is, how do you just pass in the value for B during the function call when you invoke it, but don't pass in a value for A when you're invoking it?
Can we like maybe reassign the value of B using the what is it called? Logical operator. Let me just
try it.
yeah. Okay. This will probably throw an error because I'm just doing a whole bunch of guessing work, but let's see if maybe that. Okay, so that doesn't work. If B is undefined or null, then it will use this value, but B has a default value, so I don't know how to go about that.
Can you try passing undefined for the first one?
Like no value for B.
When you're calling the function, just pass undefined and then pass a value now for B.
I don't understand you.
So when you call the function on
yeah,
line 115, I was actually
115.
able to say, yeah, just the first value should be undefined.
The first value should be undefined.
Yeah, so when you're calling the function normally, try to call the function with 5 and 2, for example. So right there in add, pass in those two arguments. So pass in 5. So you can have your previous implementation the way you had it initially in the function, the exact way you had it, yeah. And then now 5 and 2, right? Like for example, if you want to add 5 and 2, you just pass in 5 and 2. But now what Joseph is saying is for the first value, 5, instead of 5, pass in undefined.
It will switch back to, huh?
Yeah,
Where's it
that's
getting the 1 from?
It's getting it from your default value, the A, since you're passing in an undefined value. Yeah. I think that's what you were asking, Ian.
Yeah, that was what I was asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I actually just saw it also on Stack Overflow. Someone was trying to do the same thing. Okay, that's a very interesting question. You sound confused, Fatma. You
I get it now. You have to use the arguments object to change the value of the parameter inside the function. So
yeah, so what's happening is because you're invoking add with A being undefined, it's giving A the value of 1. Because when you invoke the function, when you call it, you're passing in the value A as undefined. So what it does, it uses your default value that you set to 1. Instead of trying to add undefined to 2, it's now taking your default value and giving it to A. That way we can say like now 1 plus 2. That's why we're getting 3.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for presenting, and nice job. Who was next? Let me see. I think it's Mambo. Is Mambo still here? Oh yeah, Mambo. Today you will not escape. Because Eunice, I think yake ilifanywa jana na Nelson. Nelson covered rest. So I think it's Evans is not here. Is Evans here? I think he left. So we'll go with Mambo. Mambo, can you hear me? You're on
Yeah,
mute.
let's do this. So I was supposed to cover the enhanced object literal. So basically what that means is, let me just share. So yeah, you can see my screen fine. I was just trying out this. So basically what I'm supposed to cover is the object, the enhancements made to the object literal, which basically means those synthetic sugar that we've been given by ES6 on the object. So there are a couple, we'll go through them. The first one is, we all know how to define an object. Define an object like that. Then we can give it values. For example, let's just do A. Here, let's just say 3. Then B, let's just do 5. So basically, most of the time you find that object properties are defined from variables, where we can have variables to replace the A and B here. So that is equals to 3, that is equals to 5. Then instead of hard coding this here, we're supposed to do that with ES5. But yeah. So if we console log, so we console log property A, we're going to get our 3 here, which is our variable. So with ES6, this becomes really easy because you do not have to repeat yourself, making our code more dry. So instead of having the property and the variable, you just write the property like that. So once we console log that, you're going to get the same 3, and in console log B, you're going to get 5. So that is object initialization from variables. Okay, so next, the next bit is about function expressions or methods in objects. So if we had a method in our object here, let's say a method add. So using ES5, this is what you're supposed to do. Okay, my machine is rolling up. Right.
What happened? Is your machine refusing to cooperate? Did Mambo leave? Hapana, he's still here. I think your screen is froze up. Let's wait for him to acha atarudi tu. Sometimes these machines zinaweza kukufanyia, they can decide to disappoint you the wrong time. Can you hear me, Mambo? I can see he's saying he's having technical errors, technical issues. Yeah, after to Kujia rejoin, but Pauline, hi. See you. I was about to ask you if you're joining.
Hi, I wasn't even around. Nimekaa nyumbani tu sahi.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Will you be able to do your presentation?
Presentation.
Eh, do you think?
Not really. It's I have a bit. I'm trying to finish up here so that at least niweze co-present. Because I'm trying to make it as understandable as possible. So
Okay, no problem. No
yeah.
problem. If you're not done, then you can do it tomorrow once you feel that umemaliza.
Okay, so
It's okay, no problem. As Mambo sorts his issues, Joseph, I saw your code. I saw your code for Ian's implementation. I see you're very into modules and ES6 and React imekuingia kabisa.
Yeah, influence ya React mazi.
It's very nice. Like the way you implemented it is very like you did it very well. I think Mimi, when I'm not writing like React or like using any of those frameworks, it's very difficult kunipata nikiandika code hivi. But sasa hata umeshani inspire, I'll also start writing code like that even for vanilla.
Mazee aliandika
at
code
least.
kiasi hadi nikaanza kujishuku man.
Yeah, it was very well
So
written.
the
And then you have like util
imperative
functions.
programming, man.
Yeah. Eti?
Like imperative programming, ya kusema sijui what dot text content is equals to sijui what. It's a pain, man. That's why React is the best, man. Like okay, if you use like some React in it, my template literals manini, you can avoid like a lot of code.
Yeah, you can. That's true. Yeah, but obviously you do need you need to have like a foundation. So first of all, lazima uandike hiyo code ya text content sijui in HTML before you can write.
Niandika for years, maze.
Before you can get to a point where you're now optimizing your code to now like kukaa hivyo. But it was very well done. I don't know how long Mambo is going to take because I want us to, if you don't mind, maybe.
Sorry for interrupting. I just had a question, but you can finish.
Yeah, I actually wanted to tell Joseph that if he doesn't mind, he can like show us his code. I think most of us were here when Ian was trying to figure out his issue with the application. So I think Joseph did Maliza, he implemented the functionality, but used a different approach. I think it's worth taking a look at. Yeah, Fatma, you can go before Joseph. I hope you don't mind showing us your code.
I have to leave like by 6:40. Niko na meeting fulani.
No problem.
So maybe kesho amani I can show it mbio right now.
Yeah, I think just showing
kesho would be better.
You prefer tomorrow?
I can show it alafu like I can cover modules, pick modules too, because I saw it uses modules. So like I combine the modules tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. So no problem. So Fatma?
My question is, it's the same question that Ian had earlier. Like how should I change the like default value of B, but keep the default value of A? And I've come across a solution that I don't quite understand. It's using ternary operator. So I just wanted to see if anyone can explain this to me.
All right, you can either share your screen or I think sharing your screen is better.
Yeah, 1 second. So this line 112.
So you can see B is equal to 2, so B is equal to element. If it's not equal to undefined, set it to arguments element 1. Set it to 3. Okay, does anyone want to take a crack at it?
I could try.
Okay.
We're trying to assign a value. We're trying to assign a value to that b, to that variable b. We already have a default value b, but we're trying to assign another value to b. Now we're checking if arguments. I believe arguments is an array somewhere, probably because we're seeing that we're trying to access the value at index 1 of that array. So we're trying to access the value at index 1 of that array, and if it is undefined, meaning that that arguments might not be having a value at that index, then if it's not defined, the first thing that we do is assign b to that argument. So ni kama for loop, not for loop, but if statement. So think of it like an if statement. The thing that we are checking is argument 1 is not equal to undefined, meaning that argument 1 should or arguments at the value at index number 1 should be existing, should maybe be let's assume that we have that array. So maybe just check if we have that array before, so that I don't make assumptions. Do we have that array somewhere?
No, we don't. I asked somebody on Discord, and this is what they typed out. But I asked for a follow-up to explain what that is, because like I get that you're using a ternary operator, but they still haven't responded to me, so I don't know what's going on there.
Can you console log arguments in console log arguments in the function? So just have your implementation for calling, but within the function, right before return the return, put it before the return. Yeah, right there, console log arguments.
Arguments is it's actually an array that contains the parameters. Actually, you remember that thing that you showed using the visualizer thing? You didn't notice those arguments somewhere with a length of 0?
That's what I was trying to show them. It's an
yeah. I remember now. So the arguments at number 1, that is letter b, that is the value at b now. So if it is existing, we are if it doesn't exist, that is if it is undefined. If someone calls add without the second value, we are assigning it. So I think this is just the implementation of the default variable or something, because if it doesn't exist, we are assigning that letter or that variable b to number 3.
So the thing is, I get this first part because ternary operators are like a shorthand for if-else statements, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so from here, I have no idea what's going on.
So we're checking for that condition. So if you can rewrite it in if-else statement. So let me just guide you.
Okay.
Okay. So
let me
just below, just
outside.
comment. No. Maybe you could just comment that line 112, and then below it, let's do the same thing.
Okay.
So checks for if, and then the condition that we're checking is arguments 1 is not equal to undefined. So if arguments, the value inside the arguments. So the arguments we have a and b, and arguments 1, the value at index 1 of those arguments
is not equal to.
Yep, is not equal to undefined, but you've forgotten to indicate the index.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
is not equal to undefined. Then create the first block. And for the first block, we are assigning B. B is equals to, for the first case, B is equals to arguments at that position 1 again, at that index 1. So that is if that check fails, meaning that that value exists, the B will be assigned to that value, that is number 2 for now. And then else, let's now put the else statement. Else, we are assigning now number 3 to B, but we are giving the value 3 to that variable B. So B is equals to 3. Yeah, so basically that is what that single line does. And
okay.
maybe, yeah, so maybe let's try and find out if it is doing actually what we want. So for a test case, for the first thing, if we do not provide that B, so if we call that add function with only one parameter, with only the value of A, no. That is the function that we are writing. Like when calling now, when invoking the function. So when calling the function, so just pass one parameter. Okay, so for this case, let's just talk about it first before we even run the code. So we're expecting it will check if that B exists in our call. If it exists, if it exists, what does it do? Let's confirm. Arguments 1, if it is not undefined. So if it exists, it will assign. It will do the first code block that is inside the if statement. So it will assign that B to that value. And if it doesn't exist, if it is undefined, then it will assign it 3. For this case, we are calling it without the value or without the argument B. So we are calling that function with only one parameter, meaning that it doesn't exist. We expect it to be assigned to number 3 and to return a value now. The number that we'll be putting. So we're not calling it with a variable. We are calling it with a number. So we're not calling it with A. We're calling it with a number, and a real number now, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something. So at line 122, because we're passing the numbers that you want to add. No, just one number, because we want to check the first case. Just one number, maybe 3. Good. So the arguments array itakuwa na value na ya 3 because it will overwrite that default parameter. The default parameter or the default argument hapo ni 1 for the function. So we'll have A as 3, and then it will check for B, but we haven't passed any B. So
so it will switch to this.
Yeah, it will now do 3 plus 3. So we expect 6. I hope doing my best to explain it. So just run that code. Yep, there we get 6. See now?
Yeah.
Now, if we pass a value, that value will be picked. So if we pass a second parameter, the first code inside the if statement will be passed, and B will be assigned to that value number 2, because we are assigning B to the value inside the arguments
at
array
index 1. Yeah.
At index 1, and the arguments array is just an array created from the arguments passed into the function. So we're saying 3 plus 2, which we get 5. I hope I've done my best to explain it.
Very well, thank you.
We have a comment, but isn't the code redundant? Because you see, when we declare the function, we are already setting a default value.
It is. That is why I was. Why I was asking at the first time if it is the implementation of just default variables or something like that.
Because for it to not be redundant, you have to remove the B is equals to 2. Because you could do the same thing you're doing by just giving it the value 3
and leaving out all that check, all that
leaving out all the other
ternary operator.
Yeah. So
that is why I asked the first time if it was an implementation or something.
Yeah. I don't know whether I'm the only one who sees that. I'm an Albert Pekietu, because like you see with the implementation, it only makes sense for you to do the if arguments at index 1 is equal to undefined if you're not actually passing
If
in a default.
nothing's here.
Yeah, if you're not passing in a default value. If you're not passing in a default value, then it makes sense. You still need the B. You still need the B, but without giving
Without
it
a value.
Yeah, without a value.
Okay.
Yeah, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense why you go that direction.
Okay, lovely. I think Mambo is back, so I can continue.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, that was a very nice, brief. That was very interesting. Mambo, I see you're back. Are you back, or are you just back by 1 or 2?
I am back. I'm sorry about that, guys.
It's okay.
Technical errors. So, leaving off where we were. So basically, this is how we used to add methods to objects using ES5. But with ES6, let's just log this out first and see if it works. When you console out that, you're going to find that I don't know what's wrong with my machine today. It's just yeah. So this console log here gives us our value 8. So with ES6, we can reduce this a bit more by just taking out the word function and the colon. And you are going to find that this is going to still work. Yeah, so there we have it, 8. So that's another enhancement that was made to the JavaScript object. This also comes in handy when we are having when we decide to use we can also change this up by using arrow functions. I don't know if what arrow function covered.
No, they were not. I think you can even do it because it's very small. There's a very small difference between ES5 in terms of the way they are written with ES6 arrow functions.
Yeah, so
you can use them.
Going back to where we were, we can have
Sorry, which topic is this one?
The object enhancements.
Oh, okay.
So we are basically just looking at how the JavaScript object has been made much simpler to work with, because we're going to find objects in other programming languages are really costly, and so JavaScript basically just makes objects easier to work with the improvements and enhancements. So where were we? The arrow functions. So we can have another function here. What are we going to say? Let's just look at the difference. So using the arrow function, we can just implement this really easy here by adding your brackets, then that, and then your curly braces, just like that. And then you can just return. Since we know B is larger than A, we can just use that little bit of logic. And that is supposed to work. So you can see that with the arrow function also doesn't really change much. This is the arrow function is an implementation of ES6, so we can use it here, or we can just name the method directly and just give it the brackets and go on with our logic inside the curly braces. So if we console log the diff, we're supposed to get a value. So when that runs, Oh, we're getting not a number. Someone to help me.
Can you scroll up? You see your implementation. Okay. Can you go into your diff? Go into your diff function, and then console log this just right after your. So before your return.
You get an empty object.
Yes, that's the issue. This works differently in arrow functions.
Oh.
That's why it's not working. It will not. Yeah, that's the other difference between.
So we are supposed to pass in the arguments, the parameter, the function parameters. So you can just pass in A and B here. I don't know. This is going to probably not work. Or not. Well, let's just pass in A and I've mixed up the parameters, but let's see if that works. So that works. It gives us 2. So we are supposed to pass in the function parameters if you're going to use an arrow function. So that is another enhancement which was made with the ES6. It falls under the object method definition shorthand. So basically, defining methods has become much more easier. Next is a bit that I did not understand how we are going to use it anywhere, but let's just cover it. So it is called the dynamic key property, because if it's actually dynamic property keys. So when we're working with objects, we define our keys. We can use variables like this, but basically you cannot have an expression here of any sort to make it dynamic. So let's just have an example of an object here. So we're going to have a constant. Let's just give it key1, and you're going to name that. Going to give it the value, the string value 1. Then down here we're going to have an object. And we're going to have, let me just write this down. So let's just have the key 2 here and give it the value 2. And another property 3. Give it the value 3 here. So if we were to add this property, the property that we have just defined up here, the variable, so we make it a property of the object, we can do that by this. So this one adds our variable here as part of the object. When we console log out this object, we are going to find that we are going to so you see that we have our value that we have given our variable here as part of, and it has been assigned the property value of 1. Now for the dynamic key, so this is ES5. So for the dynamic key, what happens is you first of all, using the same logic, but instead of now having to go all the way and use another line outside of the object, what you do is you put your dynamic key inside square brackets like that, and then you give it a value. So now if you console log out the object dot 1, which is our value, the value we have here, you're going to find that it gives you the value 1 right here. I don't know if people have followed that part.
Can you print the object instead of the property? Just print out
the object.
Yeah, I think that would be a better visualization.
Yeah, so in the object here we have 1, which is the value of our variable here, and the value that you have assigned it in the object like that. So also there are some other things you can do with the dynamic property keys, but I won't lie to you, I have not really understood them, so I'm not going to try and lie to you here. But basically those are a few enhancements that were made to the JavaScript object with the coming of ES6. And yeah, that's the end of my little presentation.
Very well done, Mambu. Thank you for your presentation. That was very well done. Even though you had technical difficulties, it's okay.
I'm still
more than made up for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Thank you.
So what is
questions,
left?
maybe?
Questions, yeah. Does anyone have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So how does why does this keyword work differently in the arrow function like we had seen?
It's just it's a feature they thought was something they needed to add to the language, because so you can imagine this is a bit difficult to explain because I would need to go into object.assign and some other methods we did not cover during our sessions in OP for a good reason. So I think what I can do, we need to dedicate a whole session where we talk about this, because you can reassign the value of this to a different object. So you can use things like object.assign, object.create, but just know anytime you use an arrow function, before we cover them like fully, vizuri kabisa, the value of this changes. It's no longer set to your object, the thing that is on the left side. No, it's set to something else, like the global object. That's what we're gonna pata. It's returning an empty object. It's an object, yes, but it's empty. So that behavior is something that was introduced in ES6. I can't remember exactly why they thought that was they needed to add it, but there was a reason. There was a reason why having the previous function way of doing it, the ES5, it was bringing issues, especially for big libraries. Most of these issues, by the way, with JavaScript, they normally occur when someone is building a library of some sort, like Bootstrap or anything that is going to interact with JS. Kina jQuery is a JS library. Bootstrap actually is not. Like jQuery sasa, there's really incidences where when you, for example, use this in normal ES5, it brings issues because you end up redeclaring values in a global scope that you did not want to touch. So that ability to now allow you to not for example, change values on the global or anything else is as a result of when you're working with libraries. There's normally issues with like redefining values as objects. But I think to explain it better, I think I would rather like just have a session where we we go through examples. I think it's easier when we go through examples, you can be able to see exactly what happens.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anybody else? Anybody else with a question? So who has not presented? Let me see. Evans, but Evans I think has left again, or is he here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
You are
but
left.
I am not in a position to present because I'm using my smartphone. I didn't carry my laptop to where I am currently.
Okay.
Maybe I can do it tomorrow, or maybe someone can do it if that's the last thing.
You are supposed to talk about multi-line.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we already covered it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I didn't realize that. That is what. So what is left is promises and modules. So Pauline will cover promises tomorrow. Pamoja na Joseph will also do modules. Kesho. Yeah, so I think there's nothing else in the list. And believe me, these things will make a lot of sense when you start using libraries. That's when you will start to really see them a lot of this newer syntax. Come on, when you're using like vanillites, unless you explicitly want to do it, you don't really have a need to learn like ama kuzitumia kwa code yako. You don't have to do it. But when you're using libraries, you have to, because that's the pattern they are following. Like React PD is a very good example of how you normally use ISO destructuring and REST and whatnot. You normally find a lot of places where you need to use it. Yeah, so I think tomorrow we'll finish up those two topics. And then I'm thinking we need to have a discussion around the event loop. Is anyone confused with the event loop? Or do you guys know what it is? I think that's a better place to start. The event loop in JavaScript, has anyone heard of it?
I think we should talk about it. It's quite confusing.
Yeah. Evans amesema talk about it.
Yeah.
Same. I propose that.
Okay.
Me too.
There's this concept on also about around the events. There's event bubbling and event capturing. I believe it is touched inside the event loop.
Event delegation. That's actually that's actually in the DOM.
Delegation is kind of kidogo. I was talking about the bubbling phase and the capturing phase, down from the parents all the way to the children, because sometimes you find it gives us the ability to delegate the events, but before then, when I had event listener, alafu unaona ina misbehave somehow. So
I think we did cover it kidogo. We didn't really go into, but we used it for the the implementation for the book application.
Yeah.
The click event that was happening was not happening on the actual icon.
The delegation part was happening, like we are going to the parents and passing the event.
We can cover that also.
We can still cover the topic.
Yeah, we can cover that for sure. So we'll talk about the event loop. It is one of those very confusing things in JS, but I think if you approach it pole in chunks, it will make more sense. Because it's not a part of JS. It's an API. Imetengenezwa na something called libuv. That's the other thing with JS. If you go into the specification for the language, like ECMAScript, you will not find the DOM. You will not find like half of those methods because they're not part of the language. That's why anytime you hear people talking about the DOM, it's normally referred to as an API. it's an extension. It comes with the ni kama kitu install kwa browser to help with JS. That's why the objects look very similar to JS objects, because they're supposed to plug and play. They're supposed to work together. So they're not part of the specification. Same with libuv. It's built with, I think, a different language. But the way to think about it is, just like give a brief overview. Your code runs, like, think about a pipe ya maji. Your whole code, your whole JS runs on like one pipe. And then there's like a separate pipe that goes into the event loop. The event loop is always listening for events. So at no point can you ever have two events happening at the same time, because JS is not multi-threaded. You just use one thread on your machine. So we'll go into detail. I think I'll also look for something to visualize that whole process, how it actually works. Because once you understand that, I think even Node.js becomes very easy, because the whole thing with Node.js is that event-driven architecture. It relies heavily on that event architecture. You're using the event loop. That's what it's able to do. Like create streams, read files, at the same time it's doing something else. It's a very interesting topic, but it can get very confusing if you try to do it. Okay, so we'll discuss it probably tomorrow. We'll start the discussion tomorrow, probably itaisha Friday. Yeah, but we'll talk about it. Okay, so
Ian, I don't know, I've not attended all classes, but I don't know if at any point you covered closures.
Yeah, we haven't covered because that one will cover them next week when you do functions. We have not done functional programming.
Oh, okay. And there's also these things to do with call, bind, apply. That's where they come to.
Yeah. So hata hizo, those ones also have, actually those are objects.
Yeah. I saw them in objects.
Yeah, you're talking about binding this keyword.
Yeah.
That's normally what you're trying to reassign the value of this to something else. There's bind, there's apply, and there's one more message. There's normally three of them.
Call.
Yes, bind, call, and apply. I think we can also, those ones, see, they're not so broad, but I think we can also include them, because they're normally in history too. Yeah, changing the value of this. That's basically what they do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I guess if there's anyone with a question before we end, a comment, or do you have a project you need help with, like, you can say, and then we can try to assist, like whatever Ian did yesterday, because I'll also attempt to do that to do, see how I implement it. Okay. All right. So if there's no questions, I will see you guys tomorrow. And for the guys who have presented so far, very well done, very good job. I think you're seeing the value of talking about code, because sometimes you think you know something until you have to explain it. So the explaining does help with even the thinking process, because now when you get to a point where someone asks you to explain something, you're not fidgeting and looking for the right words, because you've had practice talking about it. It's very easy for you to express yourself because you've been talking about it all along, because it's very different when it's in your head and when you're actually saying it. So asanteni sana for taking the time and preparing. You guys have been doing a fantastic job. Na tukiendelea hivi, I think this is going to be a very, like, it's going to set the standard for the next cohorts for the mentorship. So for me, it's just to tell you thank you, and na tuendelee tu hivyo, we continue with the same spirit. And without further ado, you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
You as well. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.